As you can tell from Sheril's comments, this is going to be an incredibly interesting and delightful presentation of humor, cynicism, and playfulness in Israeli art. First, I want to express my heartfelt appreciation to Linda Weiss for arranging this, and to Raz Raucher of Via Sabra Travel Agency, who as a result is, oh, Linda, this is Linda, she can't get in. I'm gonna talk to her in a minute. Linda's on the phone. Raz, I want to also tell you how much we appreciate what you have done. I want to give you an opportunity to say a few words about Via Sabra and introduce the artist and presenter, this extraordinary person, Sheril Horovitz. Raz, I'm going to turn to you and then I'm going to see if I can help Linda get in.
Okay, so thank you. And I was so happy to help Linda because I feel especially connected to Sarasota because my mother, Nancy Rucker, lives in Sarasota. You might know her. I hope you do. If you don't, you should. And you can tell her I said that. And I work at a company called Via Sabra. We are a travel company. We are very busy right now, believe it or not, because we have a lot of groups and tourists starting to come back, including the Wertheimer family, Patty Wertheimer and David. Just trying to make some connections here. We specialize in creating unique trips, letting people see Israel like an Israeli and not as a tourist. And I hope that we'll see some of you in Israel in the future on trips. I know your congregation is having a trip with another provider, which we are also really in favor of. And we hope that we'll see you with us in the future. One of the things that I've been so lucky to meet Sheril through Via Sabra that I have learned so much about art that I actually feel somewhat intelligent when I go to a museum or an art gallery. And especially because I chose to live in Israel, having that insight into Israeli art is very special. I think, Sheril, regarding what you said before about things from the past or what's humor? I think sometimes things that we didn't think were funny in the past are funny now. And so anyway, you've seen Sheril's biography. I do want to mention just a few things. She has a BFA from Bezalel Academy of Art and Design, which is the premier art school in Israel, and an MA from the Interdisciplinary Art Program at Tel Aviv University. She is an artist, a teacher, a challenger. She has a goal with her art to create deliberate interruptions in the day-to-day life and to be a choreographer of relationships and stories. And you'll see, if you have a chance to see her work another time, you'll understand that. But she brings all of that into her teaching about Israeli art. So Sheril.
Thanks, Raz. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. I will say about the chat, feel free to just drop your questions there as they come along so that they're not you don't need to hold onto them in your mind. And I don't look at the chat so often. So what I do want to ask is, Nina or Raz, if you see a question that needs to be answered or it makes sense to answer it at that moment and that I've missed, just interrupt me. And actually, it's nice. We're a small enough group. If you really want to interrupt me, just unmute yourself and interrupt me. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll play with this a little that we're a smaller group because it's kind of nice for me. I get to see, those of you with your camera opens, thank you. I get to see your faces and you're not drowning for me in a sea of screens. So that's really nice. One moment, I'll just share the presentation with you. It's going to take a moment sometimes. Okay, share screen, share. And we just want the full screen, which does like that. One moment, I need to do it again. Sorry. Okay, and we're up and running. Okay, so we'll start with a little bit of painting, but we'll go into other mediums, mostly video art. So this presentation with you will be about humor and cynicism and playfulness in Israeli art, but as you'll see, it will kind of also be a way to maybe engage with art forms that we're less familiar with, and also talk a little about how come the humor plays into other mediums more than it does in the traditional mediums of painting and sculptures. But as I say that, we're starting with a painting by Yair Garbuz from 2014. It's not so old, but Yair Garbuz is actually more of an older artist, born in 1940s, a painter who very early on and very different from the rest of kind of his cohort in time, started using humor. You can see here that it's charcoal, pencil, and pen on plywood, which has a whole, I'd say we could have a whole presentation about plywood in Israeli art. We're not going to do that right now. And the one thing I want you to see or notice at first here is that there is text in the painting itself, which is very characteristic of Yair Garbuz. And if you notice, the text is in Hebrew and there's no translation, so much so that he doesn't even translate it in the title most of the time. What's written here is Mima'amakim kraticha komedia. Mima'amakim kraticha comes actually from Psalms. From the depth, I called you God. Mima'amakim kraticha Elohim. But here he switches one word and he says, from the depth, I called to you comedy. Okay, so we can see already that he's going to play with Hebrew text and switching words to create this humor. And the other thing we can see very clearly that who is this humor directed to? Only people who are Hebrew speakers, right? It's interesting in a world where so many artists are directing themselves towards the international art scene, there's a very prominent artist who says, no, my audience, the people I want to be in conversation with are Hebrew speakers. And so my paintings, my drawings will be rooted in Hebrew language. However, even as we say that, you can start looking at the images, right? And even before you decipher any of the images, it looks very, very chaotic, right? Everything is happening at the same time, and there's no painterly order, right? If we think of paintings in the classical way, we can think of them as divided into 3/3. We can think of compositions, and here it's very, very chaotic. Another example by the same artist, and here we see the chaos again. We see again, he gives untitled, but here we have text in Hebrew, which actually holds a lot of the meaning. He says, I'll say it in Hebrew, and then I'll translate and explain. Kol od neshama be'api, lo echdal milehagen al milim nerdafot. As long as there is a soul in me, or as long as there is breath in my nose, so that also comes from a prayer, I will not stop defending. And here there's another pun, milim nirdafot. Milim nirdafot is synonyms, but in Hebrew, lirdof means to chase after someone, and nirdaf means to be hunted, okay, to be persecuted. So there's a pun here between synonyms and being persecuted, and saying, as long as I live, I will not stop from defending the persecuted words or the synonyms. So we can see it's a very, I wouldn't say it's a very sophisticated humor, but it touches, it kind of links into a collective memory that lies within the Hebrew language, both religious and contemporary. And here you can start seeing again with the images what he's doing. Again, we have this chaotic canvas with very raw type of painting and drawing. You can see here even the pencil, and you see I translated it in transliteration because he's not giving us the translation in any place. And this means ein gvul lefanecha. So usually we'd encounter a sign gvul lefanecha. Gvul is a border. lefanecha, before you. So when we arrive at some kind of border, there'll be usually a sign, gvul lefanecha, there's a border here, which is something that maybe in the US you're less accustomed to, but in a tiny country with many, many borders, we all saw that sign and we see it quite frequently. And what's written here, ein gvul lefanecha, means there is no border in front of you. And if you think of the Israeli chutzpah, or if you think of this idea of no boundaries, right? Because in Hebrew, gvul is both border and boundaries. So he's bringing in kind of the army or the relationship to the land with this tractor, but saying, no, there is no boundary, there is no border. And last one from Yair Garbuz, which will take us into the next thing. And I think here visually, you're already able to appreciate it because it's, taking very simply from Edward Munch's famous painting, The Scream, right? But what he's doing, instead of the scream, so the scream or a scream in Hebrew is ze'aka. So ze'aka. If I add the aleph here, it becomes ha'azaka. So it turns from the scream to the siren. Okay, those words are very, very close. And you can see here the military plane flying above. And I think here it's a little maybe easier to appreciate what he's doing where he's linking art history, right? An image that is expressive, personal, part of art history. And he's kind of pulling it into Israeli reality and playing with it. So and here we can see another thing where the horrific and the real are kind of embedded with humor to create a new angle maybe to look at things. And we'll also see as we go along that I'd say humor in Israeli art will relate to two major things or themes, sometimes together and sometimes separately. One will be art history. The other will be local reality, both Israeli and Jewish. Okay, sometimes together, like here, art history and Israeli reality, sometimes separate. But it was fascinating also for me to see that those are the two main pillars or themes where humor presents itself in Israeli art. So we're going to see the next video by Guy Benel from 2005, Treehouse Kit. Can I have maybe a raise of hands for a moment with how many of you are familiar with the video art? You can even wave your hand because I'm seeing you. So I had 2 waves, unless I'm missing. So for the rest of you, this is new? Video art is new. Perfect. Because we're going to see a lot of video art, which is a form. Basically, it started in the 70s when video started to come through, and then it was dealing more with the medium of video itself. In a similar way, if you think of abstract, where people turned from imitating reality to using and paint and figuring out composition, paint, color, texture. So when video came out, it was first like people were fascinated by the medium of time and movement itself. With the years, that changed a lot. And we're going to see a lot of video art. And maybe we'll slowly ask, I'd say this, if you have questions as we go along, not only about the content of what we're seeing, but also about these ideas of these mediums of video art. And we're also going to see performance art and talk a little about the difference between them. Do pop them in the chat, please, because I want you to feel comfortable. I'd say when we see a painting, we can be very clear on what we're seeing and why this is art, simply because traditionally it was given down to us very simply. Same with sculpture. Whereas when we encounter video and video art, it can seem very strange. So I'll try to touch upon that, but for me, your questions in this regard will be extremely helpful. So the way we're going to see it with the videos is that I'm going to start and allow you to see a part without me speaking, just to experience it. And then I'm going to lower lower the volume and I'm going to speak on top of what we're seeing. Okay, most of them we're not going to see the full video, but at least there are points where I also want you to just experience the sound. So here we're starting with Guy Benel Treehouse Kit from 2005. So especially since the sound isn't the center of this video, I'm gonna let this run and talk with you as you're viewing this. If you notice the first shot, there were sounds of waves and it seems like someone lying on driftwood, but as the image pulled away, we could see that he's actually on some kind of mattress. This is the artist himself, but if you notice the beard, it's very easy for us to recall a famous Zionist figure, Theodor Herzl, and this is on purpose, meaning Guy in day-to-day life does not walk around with that beard. He grew it for the video. So he is kind of in the background with this image, making us think of Theodor Herzl. He wakes up under this makeshift tree. We don't yet know what exactly this tree is, but I'm gonna move a little further forward. One moment. Okay. He's slowly taking pieces off the tree, reassembling the parts. How is he doing that? Because the tree itself is built from IKEA parts, okay, that are used to create a tree, but they actually come from other things. I'll just say also there's a whole world of IKEA hacking. If you're into it, go to YouTube, write IKEA hacking and go down that rabbit hole. It's insane. But here what he's doing, basically, he's disassembling this tree, slowly creating different pieces. And I'm gonna skip a little further forward so you can see what's happening. The video kind of slowly goes through him taking these pieces apart. Okay, so all of this is coming off of the tree. And I want to relate for a minute to the content, because we started from a man seeming to be on driftwood, waking up possibly somewhere he doesn't know under a tree with a photograph on his belly, giving us the whole notion of finding himself stranded on an island, not knowing what's going on or where he is. And he's going to arrive at the point of creating this. And I want us to also think of the image of Zionism, because he's bringing that to the forefront as we're watching this, as something that started with a vision, an utopic vision about what the land of Israel and the state of Israel should be, and how from that we find ourselves in contemporary day life, not under a tree and a vision, but rather taking care of ourselves. And the powerful part happens here. You can see it's already the bed and the mattress, and you can see the memory of what was, right? The photo he carried with him. And I want you to see now what's happening, how he's using this photo, which I totally understand, right? But I think this scene kind of, sorry about that. I think this scene of putting it under the bed kind of allows us to really understand what he's doing here, because actually he's making a comment about Zionism, about where it went, about what we remember or not, and what do we do now with our previous memories of visions when they're just helping to hold up the basics, because what he built from that tree is a bed, a chair, a table, and a rocking chair, right? The basics that we need as individuals, we definitely need it for survival, but where does the vision hold in all of that? So you can see there is humor here, but the humor is relating also to a kind of bitter reality and questions about the relationship between the vision of the state and the country and what is happening now. We're moving to another work of his. Guy Ben-El really set, I think he's one of the most famous Israeli artists in the world. Like his art is in collections such as the MoMA, the Tate, like one of the most well-known Israeli artists, and also one of the first to create these works with videos which are laden with humor and touch on issues of both our reality and the vision. And in this one moment, I'll just, I need to move this so I can see this. Okay, I'm just seeing we have the sound. Yes, I'm gonna let this play a little before I talk. This is the artist.
Honey, I'm home. Honey? Honey?
So I'm going to talk as you're watching this. And once again, IKEA, it was relatively new in Israel and this phenomena. And if you notice, the beginning kind of had the tune of a sitcom coming up, and the beginning was the most classic, Honey, I'm Home. And basically, Guy Ben-El films with his family. So the people we're seeing are actually his wife, actually now his ex-wife, but then his wife and his two children. And they filmed this whole sitcom in IKEA. You can see all the price tags, everything going on, while the store is open with no permission, by the way. So they had to film it in various locations around the world, and not only in Israel, because every time they were kicked out, it had to stop. But he is kind of playing between the real and the fake, between the ideal that we're looking for and an actual reality and what is possible. And I think, again, he's doing it in this hilarious way that makes us kind of question how we're engaging, like what is the dream we're chasing, and what is also between private and public. So yeah, and you can see all of this happening here. And another interesting thing, I think a lot also of what's funny about this is also the making of it, just understanding what artists go through to create work. And we'll talk about that a little more. And I think also the approach to regular life, meaning what happens when people, most of us go to IKEA or to some kind of other design store to purchase stuff, and what you need to start looking at it as something completely different as you move between these rooms, and also just the amusement, I'd say, of knowing this is filmed without permission and had to be cut every time, like guards were like, what's going on? Why are you in a dressing gown in this public place? And I'd say for artists in general, there's this sentence which I tend to quote, which is, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, which is definitely the case in this. So Guy Ben-El kind of sets also the stage for a lot of artists dealing with humor, because it's not such a common thing in Israeli art. We're very good at being thoughtful, provocative, dramatic, sad, questioning, all of that. But humor, I'd say also humor is slightly more difficult to produce than drama, but also in such a difficult dramatic reality, it's sometimes hard to see the humor in things. And so it becomes, to me, this fascinating thing, which Guy Ben-El really opened quite a large door to. we're kind of taking a break from video for a moment with sculpture and a whole different thing. And if you remember, I mentioned that the themes will be either art history or local reality. And with this work by Zohar Gottesman, who is really this amazing, crazy sculptor, we're seeing, the sculpture itself is called chewed material, okay? In Hebrew, the phrase chewed material is homer la'us, and it's also used as a phrase to say, oh, we've binged that too many times, it's not interesting anymore. So it has a double meaning here. It's made of, this part is made of marble, so literally marble carving. He studied also in Bezalel, but then he continued studying in Italy under amazing marble masters. So this is literally like the most classical, rigorous form of sculpting. But all of this you're seeing, everything is made from bazooka chewing gum, which is kind of the Israeli kind of classic old chewing gum that's quite tough. You need to chew it a lot until it becomes malleable and you can work with it. So he's kind of literally gluing together the old and the new, right? The eternal, because we think of marble as eternal, with something that will disintegrate. And also the form of the body in marble meets something that literally came from the artist having to chew each of them to work with them. And it's this very weird thing where also what he creates is this classical beauty, but then something quite disgusting at the same time, right? So it kind of all happens together. This is a close-up of the chewing gum, okay? So it really looks like a chewing gum. And I have to mention something really funny. This was exhibited in a variety of places, but one of them was in the Bat Yam Museum of Art, and I was there, and the elbow fell. And I was standing there with the curator, and she was like, what do I do now? And I'm like, you put it back. And she was like, I don't know how to put it back. And I'm like, and I just picked up the elbow and stuck it back because, I could see the shape and it's chewing gum, it will stick. And to me, it was fascinating because we remember that the way we usually encounter the more classical ancient marble statues isn't because they were sculpted as only a torso with missing hands. It's just because they broke along the years. So he's even taking that and enhancing how these things break. And although we think of them as eternal, they're far from being that. So that's Zohar Gottesman. We're moving forward, not necessarily in time. If you notice, this is 2011 and we were just in 2013. I'm not meticulous here about times. To a video work by Shachar Malkus. I'd say I sometimes do full lectures about this artist. He's kind of crazy and insane. The video is not so long, so I think we're going to see most of it, and it's really fun, and it's in English, so I want you to enjoy it. And at the end of it, I'll talk a little about it.
From the dawn of time, man created art. It evolved rapidly, advancing, progressing, pushing the limits. Now it's time for this kind of thing. He was a simple man with a simple life. But fate had other plans for him.
Short people got no reason. Short people got no reason.
And so his journey begun.
No reason to
Meanwhile, the art world was in for a shock.
Museum, how do you have me?
little hand, little eye.
Honey, the curator says
A week before the show.
He revealed the secrets known only to few and stared them straight in the eye. He shed his old self, defending art.
I need a suit.
With his mere pale body. Difficult challenges lay ahead. But when the moment of truth arrived, he found his unique voice.
Shit! Shit! Take it off! Shit!
His cry echoed throughout the world.
Shit! Shit!
A scandal broke out a few hours ago at the National Museum when an unidentified man attacked Picasso's sitting woman. The museum.
Get him on the phone!
A hero was born. He had hard choices to make. And then his past came knocking.
Mother, not now. Okay.
Time was running out. But he remained true to himself. The world embraced his vision and awaited his revelation.
Art is...
This summer, come witness the incredible story of the Curator.
Okay, so I'm going to let the credit run. This was filmed in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. That's what you're seeing in all the background. And in another gallery in Tel Aviv, we'll actually see the Israel Museum in Jerusalem in another video. And you can see here that Shachar is this is the artist. He plays a lot of roles in his videos, but he's tackling or attacking directly the art world. The meaning, what are people doing? What is at the center? Who is important? Is it the artist or is it the curator? Is it personal taste or is it actually something? But he's also using a format that is copying a movie trailer. So also talking about where does the finance go? Like how are stories told? What are the cinematic tools that we use to tell a story? And if you notice, when it comes to telling us what art is, he doesn't complete that, right? There's this lack of giving us an answer. And I think reflecting often what people feel in front of contemporary art of like, where is the substance? What's going on? And it's interesting to see an artist himself looking at this question of where is the substance with a lot of humor and without sugarcoating it, right? Without giving an answer and kind of saying, curators, there's a problem. Like the art is losing its substance. And how is he doing it? With an artwork, which to me is very brave. We're skipping this one in favor of this next one by Dani Michael Rosenberg. You can see here these words, Ech Eda, which are actually, again, a transliteration. Ech Eda is how will I know? But it's also a title of a very famous Israeli song, Ech Eda ve'odeni yeled. How will I know I'm still a child? Okay, so it's kind of a questioning child. And we're going to see the video. In this one, I'm going to make sure I can see your faces because I'm so curious to see your responses. We're not going to see all of it. I'm going to skip as we go along, but I marked it in a way that I know you're getting like the highlights. Okay, one moment. So I'm just going to stop a moment so you can appreciate it. Basically, he's trying to sing them this song of how will I know I'm still a kid, obviously with that like crazy speaker and heavy music and just disturbing his parents everywhere. And they're basically trying to kind of move away. And this goes on, you can see it goes on and on, more and more scenes. I'm going to skip a little.
מצייר עננים, אז אומרים ההורים, גם ילד, גם אנחנו היינו קטנים. שואלים ילד מה תרצה לעשות שתגדל, שאלה שכזאת מבלבלת ואני לא יודע.
So obviously his parents were in it, like with him doing all of it. But actually he did tell me that at some point his mom was crying and she was saying, this is really too much. Like it's just really, really too much. You need to stop this. For me, especially here, I was just cracking up. It's really interesting also this relationship between a child and a parent, the need of recognition from a parent. When do we actually grow up and not need it anymore? And what will both the artist and his parents do to create this video? I'll also just mention, as you could see here, his parents are both still alive, even though he created tombstones for them and put these two tombstones on his two grandmothers' grave just for this video. And it's interesting to me, the choice to start with, sorry, there's a plane going by. I'll just let it. It's interesting for me, his choice to put this morbid beginning, but as we go along, it's almost hard to remember it started this way. It's such an intense kind of interaction that we almost forget that it's actually started with him playing that song to his dead parents, which once again, I will say they're not dead, which I'm kind of happy to say. Yeah. Okay. We're going to see a trailer for an artwork. And even though it's in Hebrew, okay, there's a lot you can get just from the sound. So don't worry about the Hebrew. I'll explain that a little, but it's really the sound and interaction that is pretty clear. Once again, this is filmed in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, but a few years ago. So the exhibition doesn't look like this anymore, but you might recognize some parts of the permanent exhibition from one of the previous videos.
היי, בדיוק באתי לסטרס לך.
חתכתי לך, אני תמיד מגיע בזמן.
Basically, we're hearing a conversation between a couple.
מה קורה, מה שלומך?
בסדר, מה המצב?
חם, אני משתגע.
That's the husband.
תקשיבי, רשום לי ביומן, שישי לשמיני ירושלים. מה זה הדבר הזה? למה...
And basically, they're looking for each other in the museum. They both got lost.
דבר הזה.
אבל אודי.
So they're playing in the museum, and she's asking him not to, like, that it won't be like every time. Please come on time. Please don't lose me. Please find me.
לא, אבל בחייאת, כאילו, הפעם נעשה את זה.
Okay, so it's kind of this typical conversation between a couple, but they're either lost in the museum or just hiding from each other. Maya Sharabani is an artist, a performance artist, a photographer, and a sculptor. Udi is actually her husband. He's an author and a songwriter, published author and songwriter, and they collaborated for this work. And we're soon also going to see more work by Maya. Okay, we're moving on to a work by Tamir Tzadok. And once again, we're going to start with the sound, then I'll lower the sound, but this time you also have English subtitles and it's in English. But I want you to experience some of it before I start talking about it.
אנו מזמינים אתכם להצטרף אל המסע להקמתה של תעלת עזה.
Hello, welcome to the Gaza Canal Visitor Center. שלום, ברוכים הבאים למרכז המבקרים בתעלת עזה.
מרכז המבקרים על שם רבין בתעלת עזה כולל סיור וירטואלי בתעלה, תיעוד היסטורי של החפירות וראיונות עם מוביליו. במשך 8 שנים נחפרו 61 קילומטרים והוצאו מיליוני טונות של אדמה, 15,000 פועלים יהודים וערבים חפרו את התעלה. אל תגידו אי אפשר, תגידו אי אפשר. מה שהתחיל כיוזמה אמריקאית, ידע משברים, אסון רב נפגעים, הפך לסמל להשתנות ושיפור, ונוצרה בו מציאות חדשה, מציאות של תיירות וסבסוד, תעשייה ומסחר.
So, I don't know if you noticed, this is built completely like, one moment. This is built like any professional video you'd encounter at a real visiting center. I don't know if you had that feeling watching it of like, why is this humor? It looks like a good solution. Let's do that, which is kind of the crazy thing about this video. In an impossible situation that we live in, where I'd say it's easier to live in denial than to actually acknowledge the reality around us, this artist is kind of imagining a whole new reality and producing this video of an imaginary visitor center and an imaginary solution to what's going on in Israel and specifically in the relationship with Gaza. And I think in this way, the humor, it's so potent because the reality is so hard to fathom, that suddenly when we see this fantasy, it almost looks real. And he's playing with that and taking the medium. And I think it happens a lot in video art, where the art itself tries to imitate specific forms, right? Because we know even in cinema and film, we have documentary, we have comedy, they all have very specific structures. If you remember with Guy Bener, the fact that the music was specific and then we heard that first sentence, honey, I'm home, it's a form, right? It's a form in the same way a painter will use, a triptych, right? 3 panels to relate to Christian, more traditional artists. So in video art, artists will choose kind of to lean on a specific form so that they give us a very specific feeling. This, by the way, even though he's referred to as a minister, it's actually Tamir Tzadok's dad. Here's Tamir himself and his brother. So all this footage, and this happens a lot in Israeli art, all this footage is fabricated and all the people are either actors, friends of the artist, family of the artist, but it's fabricated in a way that looks completely real. I'm going to skip forward. You can see there's even like a scholar talking about it. You can see he's talking here about a memorial that will be part of this canal. Again, the scholar, examples from the world, tourists that are coming, this whole kind of beautiful, weird ideal.
ברוחבה נע בין 2 ל5 קילומטרים. ניתן בקלות לעלות על מעבורת ממפרץ פלשת וממפרץ פילדלפי ולצאת להפלגה של מספר דקות אל האי. אנו במרכז המבקרים של תעלת עזה מזמינים אתכם לסייר גם בקומה השנייה של המרכז, בתצוגת החי והצומח של התעלה ובתערוכות האומנות המתחלפות.
Okay, so it really even advertises itself, and he's taking this extremely difficult situation and really turning it into this weird historical fantasy. We're taking a tiny break with a painting just to kind of, I'd say it's an eye cleanser for a moment. And again, if you remember at the beginning, I spoke of the two major themes that come up when it's humor. It's either reality, local reality, or it's art itself. And here you can see a work by Galia Pasternak. This is kind of almost a self-portrait, but you can see the painting is sniffing her out, right? And this relationship between being an artist and the art, going into the studio, kind of confronting the white canvas, which is something that artists along the years talked about quite a lot, because there's something very scary about doing art. In a way, walking into the studio is agreeing to open the door into the unknown and play and see what happens. It's very different than living in a world where the function, right, determines what we do. Because if I know the function, I know what to do. But if it's not about the function, if it's about the thought, the beauty, the feeling, then there's no blueprint. And in this painting, she's really doing that. And you can see how, the painting is sniffing her out. You can see how terrified she looks. And to me, it's one of the funny but very, very true relationships between artists and art. And what happens when they're alone in the studio? It's very, very lonely. Many of us encounter art only in the galleries and the museums, and that's different. But in the studio, it can be very lonely. Another work, we're looking at a sculpture by Mirav Kamel and Khalil Balabin. They're a couple. They're a couple in real life, and they also create art together, a variety of materials and mediums. This is soft sculpture, so it's made of fabric, stuffed fabric. But actually, what it's based on is this very famous performance from the 1980s by performance artist Marina Abramovic, and then her partner to life and to art, Ulay. They did a lot of works together. In this work, Rest Energy, it's a performance work at a length of 4 minutes, where these are actually a bow and arrow, where they lean back. So they're stretching the bow and arrow so that if any of them let go, basically she dies. Performance art at its earliest stages was asking a lot of questions about the relationship between art and life. So there are a lot of very difficult ones. And during this performance, they had microphones right next to their hearts. So what you can hear in the documentation, and if you were there at the performance, is their heartbeats and breathing, which get very, very heavy, because leaning like that for 4 minutes, and Marina talks about it, she says it felt like forever, right? You can see here what Mirav and Khalil did. They basically kind of let it loose, let it go with the arrow, like smacking her in the face, kind of playing with that. And you can see here another element of their humor, and you can see here in the title. So if you remember for a moment Yair Garbuz and the pun and the play on words, it's seeping in even here. I mean, Virginia Woolf, and you can see this definitely looks like a vulva with this woman inside and the wolf. So this, on the one hand, very intricate sculpture. They're created beautifully, but really playing on this pun, very, I'd say also very childish humor, right? And then there's this, to me, there's an interesting tension between the childish humor and the meticulous sculpting, right? It's kind of taking a pun very, very, very seriously. I'm just looking at our times. Okay, we're good with times. We're gonna see a video by Yael Frank. The video is called A Problem, and it was a larger exhibition which included also an installation. It's funny, you know, until this session, I didn't realize how much IKEA features in this session. I think there's something about IKEA that marks a transition within Israeli society of like purchasing things that are made here from a very patriotic point of view to the prices going so up, so high, and having to and just flocking to where it's cheapest and easiest and kind of taking care of the basics. And to me, that's the reason why it appears so much, because it's a marker of, if I'm going to take it very extreme, I'd say from Zionism to capitalism. Okay, if that's saying it in a very, very extreme way. But if I think of a marking point where consumerism is kind of taking over and taking more presence than ideals and visions, then IKEA kind of landed in Israel and marked that. I just want to say what I said now, I've never said before. And it's not based on anything other than seeing what I'm sharing with you in a hunch. So I'm going to need to research that a little more and see kind of, wait a moment, is that really true? But to me, it's also one of the very interesting things that, as we're going, I can slowly, with the compilation, we can slowly see recurring themes. So these are actually these glass IKEA cabinets, but you can see she resculptured them into shapes that look almost human, but definitely hunched or bent down, no longer functional. And another interesting thing to think about this is the moment they're not perfect, that's when they feel they have something human in them. And to me, that thought is very beautiful, because we as humans, we're not symmetric, we're not perfect, we're not aligned. That just doesn't really exist. We're not made in a factory. And the transition, the sculpting here, the effect of it is almost giving those cabinets some of a humanity. So we're going to see pieces of her work. Okay, it's in English, and I'll let us see some before I talk about it.
This is a film about a problem so big that it's hard to think of the right title. Imagine a title such as X or Lovebirds. The main character in this film is a person of color, any color. They struggle.
They're angry.
They're full of love. They're desperate. Try to watch this film as if it is addressed to you. So often we watch films about a problem and we feel that they're talking to someone else. They are not. This one is talking to you.
Now, you may think that this film is accredited because it's about a problem.
Wrong.
It is accredited because it is shot in a location so charged with history, culture, and pain, so torn by economic disparities, so uncertain about its future.
Often you will wonder if the filmmaker is fair to side with the people who are right. Just wait for the end. The problem is that the place in the film is ruled by the wrong people. It's been like that for centuries. There used to be a time when it was ruled by the right people, but corruption,
money, wars,
and the United States of America
caused it to slowly collapse into the poor state in which it is now.
Okay. Did you notice the United States of America was just blamed for everything? So this film, this is a spoiler. They never say what the problem is. Okay. It's a film about a problem, touching on, I'd say, taking everything that is not politically correct to say and kind of subverting it and saying it anyway, with these talking mouths in this dentist's office alluding to everything, but never talking about the problem directly. It's something between frustrating and offensive to watch the film. And I don't know if you notice also something about these talking mouths that are like not real, but it constantly feels as if they're like over smiling in a way. There's something very ominous about it. So this is Yael's Frank, A Problem. And notice the choice of doing it in a dentist office, which is one of the most sterile places, right? It's kind of sterile, it's clean, and the contrast again between speaking out those things, mentioning a problem, but in a place where everything is supposed to be extremely sterile. We're gonna see here in the next video, which is actually, this video is a documentation of a huge exhibition, solo exhibition that was all over the Helena Rubinstein Pavilion, which is kind of an external part of the Tel Aviv Museum, and it's very large. This exhibition by Tamar Hirschfeld was called Neuland, or in Hebrew, Eretz Chadasha. Neuland is actually the name of the title of the utopian book that Theodor Herzl wrote about the state and the land of Israel in his Zionist writings. Okay, so once again, we can see even in the title, the reference to history. And what I want us to do, we're not going to see everything here because it's also a documenting video, and I want us to see parts, and we'll start with a little bit of sound, then I'll lower it and we can talk about it.
אינסטליישן ופיסול להצטרף. הכי חשוב לי ההומור והכלילות. אני מרגישה גם שזה מייחד אותי. גם די נדיר בשדה האומנות, גם מקומי.
So she's saying what's important for her. We're seeing shots of the installation. Everything you're seeing is, one moment, I'll go back a little just so you can see. All of this is sculpture, nothing is real. She's a sculptor, painter, video artist, like kind of insane. So everything we're seeing here is fake. And she's saying that the humor and the lightness of what she was doing is very important for her, and it's not very common. And we're going to see in a moment also excerpts from a movie she created with the skeleton, Sheldon. Her father was an archaeologist, so it's not so surprising. In the movie, she basically falls in love with the skeleton, and the whole exhibition is kind of touching on the relationship between the past and the present, between the way we regard this land and the way we live in it and use it. Once again, these are all sculptures, nothing of this is real. You can see kind of it's a mishmash of everything coming in and kind of mixing together. She talks of it a little bit like this Luna Park where everything crashed in, all the Israeli symbols, all the history, all the mediums, kind of playing with all of that. You can see the chaos of it. And I just want to mention, and this, one moment, for instance, this is copy of a famous Israeli painting, but that she painted for the exhibition. I think I'll try and skip to another. I mean, you can see in the making of, you can see even this painting. So a lot comes in, or this. It's hard to understand this exhibition fully. It's a very, very strange one. But I think what you can mainly get from it is also the chaos, which I think resembles a lot of what we go on with here, how we live in this chaotic world where past and present and future are all kind of happening all together. And so she creates even this Bedouin story, which you'd sit in the exhibition and experience as virtual art, or this make-believe mangal, barbecue, right? Again, all sculpture, nothing of this is real, alongside kind of high art painting. So she's mixing between all these mediums, the high and the low. And in this exhibition, actually, there was even an ATM for people to take out money. And it was also the only time the pavilion was open until midnight, so that people could actually come and hang out in the exhibition. This is the artist. She's talking here about the art. Okay, we're going to see a quick trailer, no words, a lot of fun, and then I'll talk about this a little. So this is filmed in Old Jaffa. We're seeing this character here. You can see it's filmed like a trailer or something. This character that is engaging with everyone. She's holding a rolling pin and cookbooks, seems to be a kind of weird, funny celebrity. And she's running all the way to the exhibition space where Her exhibition was held actually in the Jaffa Museum, which holds also the archaeology part. If you recall, this is Maya, we'll see her in a moment, inviting everyone to her exhibition. This is the artist. And this is her character. Maya Sharabani, who I'll just say she's also my best friend and work wife, creates characters very often. And in this exhibition called Suggested Serving, she created this character, Tina Nomi Saida, which basically read people's futures and fortunes within cookbooks. So she gathered, do I have the image? No. She gathered, you can see around here, hundreds of cookbooks. For months, she was posting and asking people to send her old cookbooks, really stuff also from the 20s and 50s in Israel. And people could come to the exhibition and have their fortune read with a cookbook. Obviously, I did that too. And a lot of people, to have my fortune read, I would need to choose a cookbook myself and then give it to her and ask a question. And she would open a random book and then read my fortune through that recipe. So this hilarious kind of encounter around, again, the past and the present. And the exhibition was also she also does photography. So this is just one example of the photographs that were hanging there. This is her grandfather. She basically took photos of her grandparents, but with the various dishes that they had at home, the old ones. So they don't appear in their face, but the images of the dishes do appear there. And a little bit of painting. For a very recent exhibition, it actually is closing in a few days by a young artist, Noah Ironic. You can see even in her choice of name. And you can see here again the relationship between the title and what we're seeing, painting that goes back to this hyper-realistic type of painting and touches a lot. And this whole exhibition was revolving around Israeli masculinity in a very extreme way. You can see this, and the name is Sasa Abale. It's like move on, you old man, kind of, or folks. Or here, Mangal of Love, you can see this relationship. So the whole exhibition was taking on what Israeli masculinity is in a very, very non-flattering way. And we're reaching almost the end where we'll open up for questions. And I think I kept this to the end because I don't know, to me, I love it. I love it. It's a question of taste. Let's see what you'll think. And this video was created during COVID lockdown. So it was all filmed via Zoom, basically.
Yo soy Daniel, el hijo de Yoli y Samuel, el hijo de Abraham y Paulina, Abraham el hijo de León, que es el abuelo de León, casado con Mari, los padres de Fernando, el marido de Kelly.
Okay, I'm stopping for one moment because they're speaking, right, in Spanish, Argentinian, right? So for those of you who don't know the Spanish, and then the subtitles in Hebrew, I'm just going to explain and then I'm going to play it more. Notice the word Keren. So the artist, her name is Keren. Okay, and each of the people she's filming are basically going through how they're related to her through her husband. Okay, so it's people recounting. I'm going to play this and then
Yo soy Gaby, la esposa de Daniel, el hijo de Samuel, el hermano de León, el padre de Fernando, el esposo de Eren.
Mi nombre es Héctor.
So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take down the volume and I'm going to do one for you with translation on the spot, okay? Just so you can get the feel of one of them. So my name is Sergio Firman. I'm the husband of Teresa Schenkerman, who's the godmother of Fernando, who's the husband of Keren. Let's do another one because they're funny. My name is Teresa Schenkerman. We just heard of her. I'm the daughter of Jaime Schenkerman and of Esther Dubinsky. My grandfather is Avraham Schenkerman and Maria Esther Bilik. Avraham Schenkerman Paulina's brother, Leon Geller, with the son, one of his sons, Fernando Geller, the husband of Fernando, Karen. Now you notice it didn't work very well. Hi, I'm Dan. My dad is Isidoro. His brother is Leon. His son is Fernando, and his wife is Karen. The reason I love this is because there's something we're seeing on the one hand, the portraits of this family with their background. We're getting to know the family. It's also interesting to see how we tell the story of our family just through the family tree. And they're put on the spot. They're trying to figure it out as they're going along. And Karen, who doesn't appear in this video, and she's not, it's her husband's family. And if you just think of how we try and place ourselves within a family, within our partner's family, how does it work? How is everyone connected? And is it even something that we're able to tell, right? Because it's so intricate. Family is so complicated. It's so crazy that trying to tell it in this way is kind of, on the one hand, going for I'd say, it's the least information in a way, right? But we're getting so much information because we're slowly seeing these characters and we're seeing the space that they live in. And we're also slowly seeing the different ages, the different generations. And we actually have this crazy, weird family portrait just by speaking. And you can see that the backgrounds become fascinating, that the way people talk, the age and the relationship between the background and the person, to me, are absolutely fascinating. One moment, what is this? I can see something in the chat. Okay, so what I'm doing now, I'm just checking. Okay, so yeah, okay, we're good with times. And I do have, yeah. So, and I want to open up basically for questions, anything you have. And I think it's lovely. We're a small enough group for whoever wants to ask, just unmute and let's have a conversation. Yes, Judy.
In this last one, did the characters, did the people pick their backgrounds, or did the artist pick their backgrounds?
So first of all, I want to say that's a lovely question. And especially if you noticed, and it seems that you did as we were going on, there's this play between what's real and what's fake, right? Especially in the videos. So she let people choose their backgrounds. It was also filmed via Zoom because we were under lockdown. So it's not the most amazing quality. And in that way, to me, it's fascinating. If you just look now at your screen, right? And you see the different backgrounds, there is so much information coming in, right? And it's easy, you know, even if you think of my background, which is kind of not giving much information, right? Which I do so I can maintain like more of the concentration on what you're hearing rather on what's going on here. But if you look, we suddenly notice, and I think that's a lot when it comes to art, it's about noticing what might be in plain sight, but finding a way to bring that forward and engage with it visually and aesthetically, because beauty, aesthetics, and these things, they happen everywhere. And I think what you asked and what's interesting about that is that Karen in that way also realizes that if she manipulates the background, then she's pouring herself into the situation, right? Because we each design our space or curate our space very differently. So by not manipulating that, by not directing people, she's basically allowing their own aesthetics to come forward, and it completes their character, right? Because there's something about the way our home looks like that it's our curatorial choices, right? If you just think of the entrance to your home, just think even for a moment of what you choose to put in plain sight where people enter your home and in the living room are things that you're proud of, things that you want to remember on a daily basis, things that you're happy to have a conversation about, and then you organize them according to your own visual taste, right? The things you don't want to talk about, the things you find personal, you hide in the back, right? In the archive, right? So these are choices we make, and she kind of plays with that rather than manipulating it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
I do. It's me, Nina. The art that you described and the range is so clever, so interesting, so unique, so informative, emotional, psychological. Do you find that this is more representative of Israeli art today, or just a portion of Israeli art today?
So I'll say this, in terms of being, I think, complex, both in aesthetics and in the content that it's kind of putting forward, I think that's very true to Israeli art as it is. You know, I travel the world, I see art, New York, London, Berlin, wherever. And I'm always surprised, and I kind of want to say our art scene is really high level and interesting and potent and strong. So in that way, I think it's very representative of Israeli art. However, and I'll say this, even though this is a whole session about humor and playfulness and cynicism in Israeli art, it's still a very tiny slice. And just to get maybe the idea of that, if I ask a question, if for those of you who remember, I mentioned a Facebook group with lecturers and people who teach art, and we ask their questions. If I ask a question in that group of 900 people about war in Israeli art, about gender in Israeli art, about the land in Israeli art, and I'm mentioning things that were coming up, there are, 100, 200, 300 comments, right? Just like, it's overflowing. When I ask a question about humor in Israeli art, there are about 28 comments, right? And piling up to maybe, and some of them are repeating the same artist. So piling up, I mean, I could add more here, but really we're talking about dozens and not hundreds. So again, in terms of content and complexity and the way it engages with life, I think it's very telling of Israeli art, but the manipulating and using humor as a central tool, no, that's it's very rare. To me, it's also refreshing because maybe because it's so rare. And the need to look at things with a little more humor. I'll also say, notice some of the humor is quite dark. Like it's not all, there's very little, even in Israeli humor, there's very little lightness, right? It's like even the humor has some heaviness to it. So yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I was struck, and I live in Israel, so I found this very reflective of Israeli culture, but I think that there's a big disparity between what Israeli culture is today and what the dream of the state of Israel was. And it's so surreal, all of these things that we just saw are so surreal and so cynical and so cryptic in a way that, I think we have this problem of lost in translation between what Israel has become and what Israel was meant to be. And that's what I was really struck with by.
Yeah, I think it's also a really interesting comment, because if we kind of look at the things, they're very often relating to past and future, like what was supposed to be and what is. What did we imagine and what is reality like? What could reality be? Maybe I'll show you one more thing before I'll check if there are more questions. Let me show you one moment, share. It's an excerpt of a video by the artist that we already saw with the curator video art. So we're gonna see this for a moment.
Marcus, please report. What is your status? I'm about to enter the bootcamp. Men's Music Protocol.
So we're basically seeing the first Israeli on the moon.
Proceed to Pita preparation. Marcus, do you read me? Do not overload. Do not overload. I think we have lost the salat. Marcus, Tahina first. I repeat, Tahina first. Initiate Amba protocol.
By the way, just notice this is obviously impossible because if it were in space, that whole source would be going around, but definitely asking here questions about the relationship, you know, this ideal of landing on the moon, of an achievement, right? The highest, in a way, human achievement. What flag would we post there? In this case, the falafel, is that the most serious like accomplishment, which is basically also there's a question, is this Israeli or is it actually Arab or Middle Eastern, and the seriousness of it with this weird video. The other thing I do want to mention about this is that very often, you know, we think of art as a serious business, right? And especially like if we spend so much time and money in doing this, it needs to have gravity. And to me, that's a very, I'd say it's a wider question of the way we understand humor and lightness in our life. I can say on a very personal note, I tend to, in the scale of what I give more attention to, or usually, without awareness, what I'd give more attention to is seriousness, right? There's something like about being serious, about engaging with things seriously that seems professional. It seems connected to adulthood, to responsibility, to all of that. And for me, I'd put a question mark of all of that. And what happens if we kind of tip the balances, not throwing seriousness out the window, but regarding humor and lightness and playfulness as values that are as important in the way we engage with life and with others. And to me, it's interesting to see, because I think the art reflects that lack of balance in life. Because I see, even when I view it, do I relate to it with the same respect that I do to art that like is you know, very dramatic or sad or tragic? So to me, it also asks a kind of wider question about the places of these attitudes to life, and not only to art within our kind of day-to-day living. So we have time for a question more or two, if you'd like, before we close the session.
It's Nina. I have another question, unless somebody else has raised their hand or comment. You talked about balance in life. In your opinion, would you say the art that you presented is representative of more pessimism, optimism in Israeli life, or both?
First of all, I think to make art, maybe to make anything, you can't be a pessimist, right? Like there's so much doing involved in creating that, I don't know, I don't think it can come from pessimism. Or I find it hard to think of a situation where it comes from that. I do think though, that there's something, maybe there's some despair in it. If you think of Guy Benel's video with the treehouse kit, right? There's something that is quite very much criticizing Israeli society and saying we've kind of lost the vision. But on the other hand, in order to criticize, the artist needs to believe there's still reason to give criticism, right? Because otherwise, why do it, right? So Herzl's vision might be lost or criticized as lost in that video, but he's still using Theodor Herzl's image, still relying on the fact that his audience will know who this person is, and still relying on its ability to create this bittersweet smile. So actually, and to me, this is not only to me, it comes from a long line of thinkers that mainly relate to, I'd say, Israeli secular left criticism, and the fact that as long as people are criticizing, it actually means that they do have hope and they do want to engage, right? Because otherwise they'd be indifferent, right? If there's no hope, why even say something? Why criticize? So the only reason to do that is when you're still believing and hoping and optimistic of the fact that there's a possibility to change, to engage, to have a dialogue or conversation with someone. That's my take on it. Yeah, you might say I'm a die-hard optimist if I'm able to see that in that, but that's already, you know, the way I prefer seeing it.
That's such an incredibly good note to end on, Sheril. This has been extraordinary, exceptional, enlightening, delightful, wonderful, fascinating. You represent all the best of Israel, of humankind. I'm so very impressed. I want to express my profound gratitude to you, Roz and Linda. I am so glad we recorded this. I hope to share with many, many people because it was a very special experience. Thank you, Toda Rabah.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for being
I'd like
here.
to thank you for expanding our vision of art avenues. As always, Israel is in the forefront of innovation. And we thank you for an enlightening program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheril. Thank you, Roz.
Thank you all.
Have a good day.
So wonderful. Yes.
Great program. It was nice to see art from a different perspective.
Thank you. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you.
Thank you. Toda Rabah. Lihitraot.
Toda Rabah.
Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.